wherever I am. A vision of you makes the darkness fall away.
Hi, I'm Dr. Chris Stevens, and this is the Psychology to Live By podcast. Welcome to Psychology to Live By. I'm joined on the podcast today by Canadian singer-songwriter Luca Fogale, who hails from Burnaby, British Columbia. His network music profile says of Luca, quote, his musical mission is to provide comfort and sanctuary, not just from the cruel world that can so often bring us down, but from the dark thoughts and messy feelings that can plague us in our most insecure moments. No doubt today we'll discuss this in terms of Luca's newest studio album, Challenger. And by the way, that's his fourth LP, following 2016's Safety, 2020's Nothing Is Lost, and 2023's Run Where the Light Calls, the latter two of which received Juno Award nominations for Best Adult Contemporary Album. Anyway, he's clearly been busy and is in a creative flow, I would suggest. But again, from the network album notes, here's a quote. Challenger offers listeners an emotional sanctuary, but the subject matter is more personal and raw, mirroring Luca's own journey with mental health and self-worth over the past few years. He goes on to say that Luca grapples with generational patterns, apathy, masculine ideals, and social tumult. So clearly there'll be a lot for us to talk about, to unpack there. And also, this is a quote from Luca, there is a lot to be cynical about in this world. Well, that's true. But he follows up by saying, I'm trying hard to oscillate to the other side of that, towards trust and towards hope. So, no doubt Luca and I will have much to talk about given our podcast theme of music, creativity and mental health. In particular, I really look forward to exploring Luca's developing understanding of the origins of his creativity. As he says, for a long time I considered songwriting as a channeling of the cosmos, of extrinsic influence, as though ideas were merely flowing through us, he says. But the older I get, the more I've come to firmly plant my flag in the belief that all of this artistic expression comes from deep within us, the parts of ourselves that are either the most ready or the most needed for this world. So, with these intriguing and suggestive words, I welcome Luca Fogale to the podcast. So, welcome, Luca. How are you? You well?
Doing well, Dr. Chris. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, that's my pleasure. That's my pleasure. You can tell by that intro, I am really looking forward to this conversation because I think you have thought very deeply about the things that are central to this particular podcast series, i.e. creativity, music, creativity and mental health. But I might start by just asking you for the shortest of potted histories. I noticed that you talk about generational patterns, and looking at your lyrics, I kind of have a sense of what that means. But it might be good for the audience to have a bit of a sense of what made Luca Fogale.
Sure. Thank you for the beautiful intro, by the way. So I'm a first-generation Canadian. My parents came over from Italy in the 50s. And I think when I speak about generational patterns and trauma, I think that the biggest thing that I've sort of had to reckon with is the very sort of classic immigrant struggle of feeling as though your self-worth is derived from the work that you do, or the sort of immediate value that you provide this world. And so I think that's been the thing that I've struggled with the most, is feeling as though that just by being, I am worthy of goodness and love and value, and that I'm not just the sort of the I'm not just the things that I have done, and that I
Mhm.
have value just by being here. And so seems to be sort of a daily exploration for me, especially as I get older. And I noticed my parents growing and changing as well. And so I would say that's the sort of cornerstone of the darker side of who I am. Um,
That's very interesting, and I think we'll return to that theme and dig deep into it. It's interesting, as you probably know, uh, you scratch almost anyone anywhere, you'll find insecurity, right?
of course.
And the issue that you described there, there's one of what your value is or your lovableness. Is a central concern. Well, for most humans, not so much for ones who are really damaged goods. Certain presidents come to mind, I mean,
Hmm.
but he's very damaged, Anyway,
Of course.
so, and a story that I often tell people is one I call the universal delusion, and it relates to this universal feature that people don't think they're good enough. And
Hmm.
that sort of deep down, there's a sort of original sin, if you like, or there's some sort of stain, or just not good enough. And I didn't ask you whether you have children. Do you have
I
children?
don't.
No, okay, but you know of these things called babies.
Yes, I have
Yeah,
heard of them. Yes.
yeah, and you may have held one.
Well, more than,
Yeah,
yeah, a couple. Sure. At least a
yeah,
few.
exactly. And like, it's a universal experience that when you hold a baby, um, it would be ludicrous. It would be what I would call a category mistake to ask that child to improve itself so you'll love it, or to
Mm,
do something to warrant that love.
mm.
You know, and so it's clear we're born into the world uh, valuable, inherently worthwhile.
I totally agree. It was one of my one of the points of struggle with me as growing up Catholic, the idea of original sin and the idea of sort of an
Uh,
unworthiness. Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head that when you hold something so perfect and um, new and sort of just the best parts of us, just pure humanity. To to
yeah,
to to imagine that little being has perpetrated anything. Um, there was real dissonance in my mind, and so it was sort of there were a few things that sort of cracked my faith and my belief in the kind of ideals of Catholicism, and that was one of them for sure.
yeah, and yeah, because I mean the kid's not doing anything, right? And
Hmm.
yet, it's unless you're really damaged goods yourself, you can't help but love it.
Hmm.
And but
Of course.
something happens in the journey into self awareness. Um, and I think we'll end up talking a little bit about the tensions inside all human beings. And some of these, I think, are just inscribed by evolution for the necessity of survival.
Hmm.
Because clearly there's human evil, and uh, there is a sort of not a contradiction, but definitely a tension in us around self interest versus altruism, for example. These are
Hmm.
both instincts, I think,
Hmm.
but they're often in conflict. And in evolutionary psychology, there's a whole field dedicated to cheating and cheater detection.
Oh, okay.
Do you
Sure.
know when people lie or behave very
Mm.
badly? Presumably, they're doing that for personal advantage at the cost of someone else. So, fantastic. I knew this was going to happen when I spoke to you. I could tell from your lyrics that we'll have to be careful because I might talk too much. Now,
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
uh,
Not at all.
but that's a really nice positioning. So, and a lot of people will relate to that, And it's not to criticize your parents, of course. They're playing out their
Of course not.
sociology, right? Um,
Hmm.
and it was very important what you do and making a living, and the promise of a country where they could do that. We have the same in Australia. It's largely an immigrant country,
Mhm.
and
Yeah, of course, those things, I think even though I speak of them sort of as negatives, those qualities of struggle with self-worth, I know that they've served me as well, and in a drive to sort of to be more and to strive. Um,
yeah,
I think I do wonder without that sort of born into me, if I would have good reason to want to achieve and to, I've always been driven, but I think it's because of it wasn't from in pursuit of any sort of accolade, or yeah, I've never craved being a star of
mm,
any kind. I think I just want to. It was uh, very much born out of just trying to be valuable, and so
yeah,
even the way that I approach, my technical skills in music, it seems to be one of competition with my own sort of survival. It seems that way, and
yeah.
as much as I try and shift away from that, I do know that those that sort of soft kind of panic in the back of my mind to be valuable has served me in a certain way. Um, but
Yeah, yeah, and like your parents didn't invent it,
of
like
course, oh, not even close. Yeah.
this might be time to. I've just finished reading a magnificent book,
Mm,
and it's by Rebecca Goldstein, and it's called The Mattering Instinct.
mm,
And it's basically a book about what you just described. Um, it's saying that human beings, like all living creatures, practice self-preservation and are obsessed with themselves in terms of
mm,
survival, right? But so there's that kind of self-mattering. But the mattering instinct is this instinct, like you said, it's this sort of quiet irritant or constant tension,
mm,
to be able to justify to ourselves why we matter,
mhm,
right? Why do I obsess about my survival when
mm.
and it seems the key to this is our consciousness that we're going to die, that we're temporary, we're
Certainly. Yeah.
impermanent,
Mhm,
and it's a fascinating book, and she describes four continents of mattering, and
mm,
only one of those is about fame, that sort of mattering. There are others, right?
right.
So it may be, her argument is that we can't get away from this, and we shouldn't.
Mm.
That it's not necessarily, a fault.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think more than ever, I'm chasing a balance of that. I do, there are so many things that I want to achieve that sort of necessitate obsession with self. You know, um, I think maybe perhaps also the thing that drove me to this career was, feeling as though I had never really understood myself or made a decision for myself. Um, and so there are things that I want to achieve, but again, yeah, I think I am chasing that balance because I think it's been I've let it control me a little too much. The sort of the drive to just to create value within myself through my work. And yet there's still so much that I want to reach for, and
Yeah,
and most of those things um, are born out of the desire to just sort of create a larger and larger sort of community of people who are supported through my music. Um, Less about, you know, I think the if I could, in a perfect world, I'd never have to make a social media post again, or I could play a show in, pitch black or something, without really any self promotion, and yet I could employ, let's say dozens of people. So it's a funny sort of balance to want to achieve so much, but to be in a position where a lot of that is driven by the sort of my persona and my name. And it's a funny sort of balance beam, one that I'm sort of
Yeah,
I
no, I
wake
get
up and
it.
I wonder about every day. Yeah.
It reminds me of a certain doctor of psychology. That's because this very project kind of wasn't my idea. It was a sense. I mean, I embraced it, but I'm a profound introvert. So, and you know, I'm doing all this social media, and you know, I've been
Mm-hmm.
highly and still am highly critical of social media,
Mm-hmm.
and so you know, in that sense, our mattering projects aren't that dissimilar. Um,
Right.
but you mentioned there, and we should perhaps bring it back to music a bit. But you mentioned there a kind of self obsession
Mm-hmm.
or self consciousness. Um, I want I just want to mark that because I think we need to come back to that in terms of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
But but not now. I want to ask you about, well, why music? You could have gone down any number of pathways. Uh, why music?
I often wonder that myself. I even looking back now, even still, I'm sort of flexed by my sort of origin in this. I was in piano lessons when I was a kid, and I found the guitar when I was maybe 13 or 14. But it was always just it was another kind of extracurricular. It was never really something that I found any value or any sort of understanding in. And it, like I mentioned to you before we started, in my sort of outset with pursuing a university degree in psychology, I
Mm.
that was it was around that time where I found songwriting, and it was because I was spending so much time alone in my life for the first time, out of high school, as
Mm.
and transitioning to university, and kind of getting older, and uh, I started to. I think I was sort of forced to take a look at myself. Who am I with who am I alone? Who am I with this, without being surrounded by a community of family and friends and um, sports teams and people sharing interests. Who am I when I am a person on the bus and I am speaking to no one? And it was listening to music around that time became something that I was doing, and it what I had never really saw sort of I never sought out music before then, and it was in solitude that I found a love for listening to music for the first time when I was probably just about 20.
Was
Um,
was there particular types of music that resonated with you?
yeah, I mean, softer things for sure. I started in sort of folk music with Bob Dylan, but also sort of like newer artists like Bon Iver around that time was uh, kind of coming to fame, and artists like The Tallest Man on Earth, and then through that I sort of went back in time and found kind of Nick Drake, and then um, at some point there was a little point in my teenage years when I was playing guitar that I thought, oh well, I don't really know what this music is for, but I like a guitar solo, and so I thought, well, I could be I listened to B.B. King and Stevie Ray Vaughan, and Albert King, and Jimi Hendrix, and so that was one early thing of music that I think gave me a bit of a lens further back into the past through a guitar teacher of mine. Um, anyway, I think it was in finding music uh, uh, in solitude, in chasing some sort of understanding of myself, and looking for a song or an album that made me feel that there was someone else who understood my sort of my
Mm.
confusion in the world and my lack of lack of joy when I woke up in the morning, or lack of purpose, or um, in that I only then did I start to understand what music was for, and try to sort of replicate that in my own way, and started to write music in that. Um, I know I could have just ended up easily and ended up in a different medium, be it
Mm.
be it, writing or visual art or something, if I had just been exposed to that instead. And so
That's fantastically said. Just in passing, you said that I realise that's what music is for.
mm,
Could you just expand on that?
sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it can mean a lot of things, but for me specifically, it means to be understood. I
Mm.
think I I still don't I still don't gravitate towards music for um, for fun or for enjoyment or for entertainment. I see how that tracks with other people. I understand that,
Mm. Mm.
but for me, it's always one to one, and so I think that the most powerful experiences I've had, both with listening to music and also being the sort of person who's being listened to, is when people feel seen, or when I've felt seen in a song. Um, and so I think that there's been a certain sort of that captured my attention early on
Yeah.
when someone, and I've very much leaned into that, uh, and felt very as though the feedback in that sense feels really human and really validating and very
Yeah.
reciprocal, you know.
Okay. There's just so much here. Obviously, there's a lot of implications in terms of social psychology here and the social nature of our intrinsic design. We're
Mhm.
incredibly social creatures, and we wouldn't have survived, from an evolutionary point of view, without others. That's obvious. No
Mhm.
individual can survive, and therefore, what others think of us is of enormous significance, and that
Mhm.
remains the case. But the existential freight of that, the depth of that feeling, of course, is not as relevant today.
Mhm.
We're not on the African savannah surrounded by apex predators, but you know, significant rejection strikes us as if it were existential.
Of course.
So there's the kind of mismatch between our emotional responses and what they were actually designed for.
Mhm.
But then it's not just enough that we get validation. It's you got to find your tribe. Like,
Mhm.
so there's certain validation that you really value. And you might, I understand what you're saying, because I might listen to a song and the lyrics speak very deeply to me and they help
Mhm.
me explicate or understand something important about myself, and I don't feel quite so alone in the world.
Mhm. Of course.
There is at least one other human being who has the same experience, right?
Mhm.
And your immigrant past, like your parents, there'll be significant parts of you they don't understand,
Mhm. Of
and
course.
that's true of all parents, of course. But
Mhm.
so that we then separate off, go our own way, and then, as you discovered, very often our sense of self falls apart. We take away all of these supportive structures called family, friends, community, habits,
Mhm.
go somewhere else, and then the question arises: Who am I?
Mhm.
And the fluidity of that can be terrifying.
It was, and I I don't know if well, I definitely wasn't ready for it. And I don't know how you would make someone ready for it, but
Nah.
it's something I've thought a lot about, in regards to sort of um, projects into the future, and also, eventually being a parent at some point in my life. And
Mm.
thought about, I think all of this ties a lot into social media, where I worry so much about our sort of future generations, where
Mm.
you're thrust into a world where, um, you know, sort of, uh, in a very cliche way, all you're seeing is the best parts of others' lives, and wondering how you measure up, wondering how
Or
you're,
the airbrushed aspects of others' lives, the
for
non-real
sure,
aspects. Yeah.
of course, of course, and the way that that plays, and I think especially for, like, just for young people in general, and maybe specifically for men, and in this sort of modern era, where we have these same bodies and minds that were built for a different purpose, however many hundreds of thousands of years ago. And now we sort of look for the same value in our lives to being, outlets for our nature and our, in our aggression and our, protection, all these things that we have inside of us. And so when I speak about grappling with masculinity, it's those things. It's wondering, what does it mean to be a man now? And I think that so much of the reason why so many young people and young men are drawn towards the very sort of macho and problematic masculine figures in this world is because it feels like a one-to-one outlet for what we had to do as in a survivalist sense a long, long time ago. And yet it doesn't serve this modern world where compassion and where so many softer things are so much more important than physical violence or things like that. I get really wrapped up in that world
Yeah.
of wondering about who will we be in the future when, if we can't seem to care for ourselves and our communities in the most fluid way anymore. Just everyone being so online and so separated by, any of the things that divide us. It's one of my fears.
Yeah, well, obviously you're not alone in that
Mm-hmm.
fear, and
Yeah.
there is a counter movement, a worldwide counter movement.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Haidt is a very significant figure. His book,
Mm-hmm.
The Anxious Generation, but there are many others, and I have some optimism that will eventually will turn the ship, because there's
So
so
too.
much recognition of the damage it's doing to our youth,
Mm-hmm.
and but our technology, it it, it exceeds our genomic evolution, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and so we're always playing catch up.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but just to come back then. So, I get it now. Music could have been something else, but it ended up being
Mm-hmm.
music. And
Mm-hmm.
tell me about a few things. I'll let you choose. I want to talk about the relationship between mental health issues, suffering, the sorts of things you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and the practice of music and the practice of creativity. Can you
Mm-hmm.
just talk about that for a bit?
Sure. Yeah. Interesting question. I think that there's, at least in my experience, writing and trying to create something that feels representative of oneself. I think there is a certain amount of patience with oneself and a certain amount of gotten better at listening to myself and also as sort of speaking to myself as a friend. Um,
Yeah.
Being able to silence the critic because if not, I would never create anything.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that I have developed a very deep relationship with myself that um, I may not have otherwise had the time or the opportunity to do so if I was um, working in some different field. And so I think that so much is necessary to, in regards to looking at this sort of deconstructing ourselves and looking at who we are, looking at what's important to us before creating something, because there has to be I feel like I have to be able to stand behind everything I create,
Yeah.
or at least I want to. And so I feel as though when I write, I feel like I'm sort of mining a channel deeper and deeper into myself and sort of uncovering my core truth. Um, Not that I quite know exactly what that is yet, but I think that I feel like I'm getting closer and closer to expressing the things that I want to express and sort of all of the all of the things I've experienced in this life, all the things I've seen in this world that sort of take their time inside myself and are presented to inside me in a way that, only I know, which I think is a valuable thing in regards to just our individuality. And so I think, trying to repeat myself here, but I think that
That's all right.
I've had to really trust myself, which is something I've struggled with. And it's been a good practice in trusting that if I spend the time, if I sort of enact the amount of care that I think I can into something, and keep my virtue centered, that whatever that ends up being, whatever, however I feel about it when it's finished or when it comes out in, all these DSPs, that it is valuable. And then I have to trust myself at a lot of different stages. I have to trust my past selves and my future selves. And
Yeah.
it's sort of, it's required me to not be so critical, which is quite a difficult thing. I'm sure you know.
Yeah, I do.
Um,
Let's just pull you up there because it's rich. So we need to unpack a few things. I think
mm,
something important to point out, and it's all the way through what you said, is you're talking about having a relationship with yourself, or you're talking about selves in plural.
mm,
And so the first thing to point out here is that there is a sort of conditioned self that you're referring to as probably more self-critical
mm,
but there's this other self, and then you mentioned the word virtue, and we might say a truer self or something like that, or a higher self, or a
mm,
so. But clearly, at least in the experience, there's a self that just sort of plays out like it always plays out, but there's another part of you that can observe that with, as it turns out, some compassion.
mm.
So the first thing to say is that your musical process seems to me to be therapeutic.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And but the contents, the lyrics, the songs, and so on, to what extent is that informed by the very struggles, the difficulties,
Mm,
I'm not an expert on your music, so I don't know. I mean, some people write
sure.
just a lot of happy music. I get the sense that probably the ratio is not going to be that way for you.
Not quite. No. Yeah. Yeah. I think I have wondered that myself. And I also, I've tried to sort of be conscious of not wallowing in emotion, but rather
Yeah,
representing things and also searching for things inside of song. And so when I think, at least I try my best to, when I do represent sort of a struggle or um, any sort of difficulty or challenge, I think I am getting better at working through it in a way that the last turn of the corner in a song or an album trends towards hopefulness.
I've noticed
Again,
that.
like you, yeah.
Yeah,
And it's not always an easy thing for me, but you read in the introduction that cynicism seems to be the easy way out
yeah,
in a lot of ways. And there's a great Nick Cave quote about sort of hopefulness being the sort of warrior emotion, and sort of
mm,
that it keeps the evil kind of down. It keeps it in. I think the quote is, keeps the devil down in his hole
nice. Yeah,
to be hopeful. And I think that I think that there is, at least I've learned it inside of each of us, no matter what has transpired in my life, I do feel like there is a spark that is kind of unextinguishable. And I think that that's what I'm chasing in regards to speaking to one other person. That if there was a doubt in their mind that let this be the sort of um,
The one
the let
irreducible element.
yeah, and let me be the one to tell you that.
Yeah, nice.
Um, that's what I'm chasing. I think
Yeah.
as I sort of
So
circle this.
in that sense, you and I are in the same profession. No, I mean
Perhaps
that.
close. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you have a choice as well. I mean, I think implicit in what you're saying is that we have to make choices. We could wallow.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, but I would suggest that empirically speaking, that would not be wise because we know what happens when people do that. Um,
Right.
I guess across my career, I've been a proponent of what I call realistic optimism.
Mm.
So it's not crazy, wild-eyed Pollyanna, lemming light like
Yeah,
optimism
yeah,
that anything's possible
yeah,
because clearly it's not.
yeah.
But there's an infinite number of ways that we can orient to what is possible. You know,
Mhm,
um, pessimistic people, they might be being realistic, but they're choosing a certain object for their attention.
mhm.
And one thing's clear for human beings that our experience is determined by what we pay attention to. So we ought to be
Of course.
careful
Yeah, I totally agree.
what we're paying attention to. And the cynic, as you suggested, I'm always interested in cynics because in my experience, they're frustrated idealists.
Hmm. You sort of banged
And
up against the wall too many times.
yeah, and the problem is being an idealist in that sense that they're not. You know, it's like when people throw up their arms and say, "Why is the universe against me?" You know, like,
Hmm.
well, no, it's not against you.
Hmm.
Your conception of it is just impoverished.
Hmm.
Right? But they become cynical. You know,
Yeah.
so cynical is the opposite of hope. Is where I was heading,
Hmm.
and it's cowardice in a way.
Hmm. Yeah, it feels like a lot of what we're shown is meant to sort of put us in a place of sort of what's the word for it? I mean, maybe apathy is the word, but just I think the
Yeah.
design of a lot of the things, the negative things in this world, are meant to sort of beat us into that state where you say, you know what, I I'm gonna look after myself. I'm too tired. Everything is too negative, and I'm just gonna turn it all off. And I think a lot of that's by design. And
Oh yeah, I think Steve
yeah.
Bannon described it beautifully. But when he used
Mm.
that now famous phrase, flood the zone with shit.
Mhm.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can do that. You can make people, you can gaslight people. You can make them feel that sense of helplessness and hopelessness. So therefore, I'll just look after myself. The
Mhm.
problem, of course, is that there's plenty of solid, really good research that suggests that pro-sociality, particularly compassion, is a win-win.
Mhm.
It's really, obviously, really good for the recipient,
Mhm.
but it's equally good for the giver. And that, and
Yeah.
this comes directly from our socially inscribed nature. Um,
Mhm.
and this is another thing it's been rattling around the back of my mind while you're talking. I've mentioned a fair bit evolutionary psychology, and one of the premises of that is that evolution per se is not interested in our happiness. It's just interested in us passing on our genes,
Mhm.
surviving long enough to get the
Mhm.
genes passed and replicated. But the problem, we talked a bit about mattering. The problem is, it's a good problem to have, by the way, is that
Mhm.
we've been so successful, at least in, most of us are going to live a natural term, that we need a new purpose in life. And it turns out that we can notice, because of our intelligence, our reflexive consciousness, that we can actually notice what tends to make us happy. So we can redesign our life towards a sense of fulfillment or satisfaction or
Mhm.
meaning,
Mhm.
and that is actually the wise thing to do. Right now, I'm leading the witness terribly here, but I want to get your views because you mentioned something like virtue and searching for things. Have you thought about maybe that in terms of building character? That's what we're here to do.
I think so. I think that, I had a thought in the past summer. There was a symphony performance down at the park. This is kind of a long roundabout little way.
That's all right. That's
Sorry,
what I like, circuitous paths.
Yeah, we live kind of by a park here, and there was a symphony performance at the Vancouver Symphony was playing. And in this big, beautiful stage, and the symphony was playing, and I think 5,000 people watching on this grassy hill, and there was a jet flying overhead. And I had the thought that I think very simply, all that I want out of my life is to be someone who helps this sort of our humanity move forward just the tiniest bit and become the slightest bit stronger, the slightest bit more altruistic, the slightest bit more sensitive. I think that yes, so yes, like so much of this is an exploration of self in regards to becoming more sort of fortuitous and becoming more ready to say yes to difficult things and to being, to empathy and to compassion and to both with oneself and with others. And I think that's what I'm chasing. And so, yes, I think like thinking about character, thinking about us 200 years from now, 300 years from now, I hope that just to be one person in the crowd that's pushing us and sort of ushering us in a direction of getting better.
Yeah, it's a kind of judgment about what will truly be worthwhile in my tiny existence.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a self-evidency about what you're describing, right? And that is that we light up. Like if someone really appreciates your lyrics and they send you a note or something that says that really changed my life, or that reached me at a time when I was at my lowest, and held me up.
Yeah, I've been regularly surprised. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. You go. Take that.
Oh, I was just gonna say I've been regularly surprised by the sheer volume of people who have reached out to me in that way. With it, I have a relatively small engaged listener base, and which is lovely, by the way. Having a small sort of audience, but the amount of messages I get that say exactly that. You've reached me at this point. I was going through this, and your music did this. I know that there is, and if I wasn't here, someone would fill this space, I'm sure. And so, but I know that there is,
but not in the way you're filling it.
Perhaps not, and that's a beautiful thought and also keeps me motivated to keep going. And so I know that I in some way I am providing something to this audience, and a bit of feedback I get after shows from management or something is, oh, you say thank you too much on stage, or even people say, oh, you seem so grateful, and because like you described earlier, there's a win-win happening here. Sure, someone comes to a show and it might be just a nice evening out, but for the most part, it's a room of people together. A lot of people are supported in feeling an emotion. There's me and my team that are supported in chasing a career and some sort of like level of an enlightenment or whatever it might be, where everyone wins here. And so to be inside that experience day in and day out, we go on starting the tour next week. To be inside of that so often feels in a very real sense too good to be true, because not all things work like that, where nobody loses here, and maybe someone gets a parking ticket and then maybe they lose, but but for the most part, it's this experience that these memories are so indelible to me because I find that to be to validate my sort of level of calling that um, I don't know. I don't know if I find that anywhere else. Um, the performance in a room of people.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else like that. So,
Yeah. And I think an element of it, of course, is that, your music is not completed. It's like an artwork on a
mhm,
wall. It's not completed until it's appreciated. Like
mhm,
you, it's the fact of the live experience that makes the
yeah,
artwork. It doesn't just belong to you in that sense.
I agree completely. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you remember we started in the intro with this shift in your thinking about uh, rather than the creativity being beamed into you from the cosmos,
Mhm,
um, you've come to this sense of it being more about important parts of self and more
mhm,
intrinsic.
mhm,
When I did my doctorate, I interviewed fiction writers, the novelists
mhm,
and poets, and one playwright, and almost all of them had this similar sense that this idea of the cosmos. None of them were
mhm,
mystically minded, right? That's clear.
mhm,
But they all, in various ways, described what we call the phenomenology of it, the experience of it, and it felt like when they were really being creative, they were a kind of conduit through which the words came, or they would
mhm,
hear a voice dictating the words.
mhm.
They quickly would correct any miscomprehension on my part. They would say, I know it's not being beamed,
Of course. Yeah.
right? Um, so I'm wondering whether it sounds to me like you had exactly the same experience, that when you're creative, it has this sort of quality where you drop away and this thing comes through you. I don't want to lead you too much here, but what is your experience?
You know, it was, I did frame it like that for a long time. To be yeah, to be a channel or to be a vessel for um, an idea grander than myself, or only being able to access sort of my higher self at certain when I'm most open. But I, and of course, yeah, I can solve sort of not in a literal sense, but
Yeah,
I, but I think so much of the reason why I've started to think about these ideas is coming sort of from, somewhere in our core here, is because I was thinking, listening, in the last few years, listening to more music and trying to actively be a more social person, trying to sort of be out in the world more. I I feel as though even hinting at the idea of us sort of being, sort of channeling something cosmic, I don't think it gives us enough credit.
correct.
I think that what a beautiful thing that we're able to do to sort of absorb this tidal wave of human creativity that's come before us and all of our experiences as an individual person in this world, and to make something new with that.
Hmm.
It might feel as though you don't know where the idea is coming from. I have had that feeling before, but I have come to further trust myself to say, I am the one. And it's not because of me, because I think that I am some sort of, you know, brilliant person. It's because it's almost all of the gifts that I've been given by all of the music that was made up until
Yeah.
yesterday, from the past how many hundreds of years of tradition, and all the beautiful stories I've heard about people sort of coming through this life in their own way, all the conversations I've had at shows of people telling me the sort of deepest struggles and all the beauty I've seen in this world in spite of all we've been through. Here's my little version of that. And it only comes out a certain way because it's me, but also I think that our individual voice is maybe the most valuable thing that we have. And so I just think that when I think about all my favorite music being channeled by just being uh, beamed down from somewhere, it doesn't seem right to me. I think
No.
that, yeah, I feel so firmly that these are our words and our ideas, and when I say our, I mean humanity. I mean this beautiful these physical beings that we are, coming through all we've come through. Uh, and it ended up just like this, and it's imperfect and it's perfect and all the above. Um,
Yeah, beautifully expressed. And a couple of observations. So I think the phenomenology is correct. It does feel like it's not coming. Like I may not be aware of what it is.
mm,
That there might be an awareness
mm,
that it's flowing, or that I need to get out of the way of this and
mm,
let it arrive. But that's just another way of describing a different state of consciousness,
mhm,
right? So clearly, what's being sidelined is self-consciousness in favour of a more fluid, expressive consciousness. And of course, we transduce everything that was before.
mhm,
Of course, it's coloured by the shapes and colours and tastes and textures that is
mhm,
us, right?
mhm,
How could it not? But I think a couple of things to say here is, talking to lots of creative people in lots of fields, there's something very potentially liberating about this loss of ego, this loss of
mhm,
self-consciousness, this loss of self-referencing and self-concern in favour of this kind of combinatorial play,
mhm,
this
mhm,
kind of being a medium for the expression, and then you realise later what you have written, right?
sure.
I spoke to a novelist who didn't realise the central metaphor of her novel until a critic told her what it was.
Oh,
And she's
beautiful.
gone, oh, yeah, shit, yeah, that's exactly what it is,
That's exactly what, yeah, right. Yeah.
And so there is a way in which our creativity writes us,
Mm,
but that has no cosmic implications. It's
mm,
more about a shift in our state of consciousness.
mm,
You could talk about it in terms of left and right hemisphere, and that
mm,
you take away the narratorizing self, the narrative self.
right.
But the part of this that I'd like to focus on, though, is it's joyous when we drop this self-consciousness, this self-concern,
Mhm,
the ego. There's something liberating.
mhm,
The real me, as it were, it is freed up from all this very specific identifications of self.
mhm.
And as you were talking, I was wondering if that's what sort of drives you as well, that there is a sense in which that's part of the therapeutic piece for you.
Oh, of course, for sure. I mean, I think that I have a very my mind works. It's working a lot all the time, and
Yeah.
not always in a great way. But
No.
what a feeling when I can spend enough time at the piano that the ego gets out of the way. You're exactly right. That it feels like the best parts of a conversation with someone else. It feels like when in speaking to a friend, where you sort of you forget where you are, and you sort of
Yeah.
find that sort of flow state of conversation where you're
Yeah.
not thinking about the things that I'm wearing. Are they critical of my ideas, or oh, I've got an appointment in 15 minutes. All these things where everything else gets out of the way. Um, it's the feeling I chase the most. Um,
Yeah. No,
I
that's
think
not.
that, yeah,
That's nicely
yeah,
nicely said. It reminds me, in workplaces, there's been an idea, it's sort of trendy at the moment, but it's
mm,
a very useful idea. A thing called psychological safety.
mm,
The basic idea, the basic definition is that if you create a culture of psychological safety, people feel free to speak their mind. They're not worried about judgment, and they become more
right,
intelligent and more creative, right? And they
of
contribute
course.
more. right? And it's pretty obvious when you put it that way, but it's not obvious when you're in an organisation and it's not psychologically safe. But I'd never really linked that to, solo practice, writing, sitting at the piano, holding the guitar, that in a sense you're getting yourself into a psychologically safe space where your own self-criticism is not going to hold you back.
Sure. Yeah, it feels like a version of the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you get to practice that day after day, and then you get to go on stage. I'm not saying it's all ideal, but you've built a life in which you're sort of chiseling away. You're discovering who you are by expressing, but you're also changing self, I would argue.
I think both things are very true.
Yeah.
I think they go hand in hand in a big way. But
I agree. We might just finish because time is flowing rapidly. But I was just thinking about, in the end. Now, let me just tell you what's in my mind. On one hand, I think it's very important that we do, in terms of mattering projects, in terms of we need to operate in terms of our human nature and make sure that we are doing something that we think gives us meaning and purpose and satisfaction. I think it's way too idealistic to think that we shouldn't need that, because it's like saying we don't need oxygen or we don't need, water. But there is this other element, and that is to do with, our existential plight and our knowledge of our existential plight, this self-reflexive awareness that I'm impermanent, and what stops us just sort of despairing that nothing's worth anything. And I think it's, obviously the spiritual traditions, particularly the meditative traditions, have their answer to this, and that is this, that when you can drop self-consciousness, self-awareness, self-monitoring, and you're just fully present right now, in this moment, there's nothing wrong. And you don't have to do anything, make anything, show anything. So, my thinking is that we want to multiply those moments. And you can have those moments inside a mattering project, inside being a musician, being a singer, being a psychologist, right? But ultimately, it is about there's actually nothing wrong.
Right.
Which is, as soon as I say that, it eludes me, because I can see how many things are wrong with me and the world.
Yeah, I hear you. I've only recently started a sort of mindfulness meditation practice, and it's quite a challenge to sit into that, to really to allow oneself to believe that even for a breath, right in this breath, there's nothing wrong.
Which of course is literally true. Right now, you don't have to do anything else, be anywhere. In this room, it's probably air conditioned or comfortable. You don't need nutrition. You've got oxygen.
Yeah. It's quite a challenge to sit into it. It almost feels like, because I have very much in a very strong way experienced that sort of that apathy that you were speaking about, that sort of that nothingness, sort of overarching feeling that there is no meaning in this, and therefore it doesn't matter what I do. And it almost feels like my antidote for that has been almost caring for my future self in a way, sort of serving the or filling in the blanks of the best version of myself into the future, where speaking about myself, a week from now, they would have wanted me to try in this moment. They would have wanted me to find the bit of the sort of spark in this moment, that And so I think rather than sitting here and wallowing in my purposelessness and my feelings of unworthiness, I think I'd rather just try. And that seems to be a bit of a compounding feeling, and has helped to pull myself out of a lot of I don't know, pits, I guess.
Maybe it's like I don't know if this analogy works at all, but maybe it's a bit like training wheels. You know, like on kids push bike, they can't just get on and they don't have the distinction balance. So they're on training wheels, and you know, I've had kids and I've watched them, and there comes a point where they've got the training wheels on, but they're not using them.
Right.
And you take them off and they fall over, and then you put them back on and they use them, and they're not actually using the training wheels, that they're actually riding the bike, and so it's kind of like eventually maybe we need training wheels, we need to feed the ego a bit, we need to construct ourselves in a certain direction, but ultimately we can just cycle away.
Yeah, I think, and also just like finding any way to take a first step, or to push yourself off in that bike. How do we get someone to do that? How do you get yourself to do that? Are you afraid? Oh, I have some training wheels, and then maybe next week you won't need them. So much of what I think I feel proud of in my life is all the result of like just pushing myself to, or a friend or my partner or my family helping me to take a one step in the right direction, and then off I go.
I agree with that. I mean, in a sense, we're all battling with the second law of thermodynamics. You know, the law of entropy.
Of course. More than ever, maybe.
If you just lie down, nothing's going to happen. Look, we could talk for a long time. I think we have. I think spoken for quite a while. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful for your music. I've been listening to it all week, you know, to sort of get a sense of it, and I recommend your music to people, and your latest album, Challenger.
Thank you.
And and I wish you well.
Same to you, Dr. Chris. Really appreciate our conversation.
And my pleasure. You've been listening to the Psychology to Live By podcast. If you like the podcast and want to know more, my website is www.drchris.life. There you'll find links to my various social media posts, a newsletter, and lots more. And share the podcast with people you like, so they can like it too. And the song you've been listening to in the background is called Horizon. That's from Luca's new album, Challenger.